Hey everyone, so I picked up this bike from a mate a little while ago. I can't actually remember if he got it with the fork or if he had this fork, but this is the condition that it was in. It's been like this for quite a while. Apparently it's quite well known in the community, so it's got heaps of paint chips on it. It doesn't have any cracks though, so that's pretty good. I would say it's a survivor. It's a few parts on it, like this diamondback seat. Nice little seat colour. So these old Cannondales are from the USA. And this one looks like it was sold in New York actually. So they're quite well known for these smooth welds on these old Cannondales. They basically just build up the joins like with filler and stuff, then file them down smooth. This is an old Cannondale Pepperoni fork, a rigid alloy fork. Came with this radial laced Gary Fisher front wheel. The rim is like a grey anodized, sort of a grey gunmetal. And James put some Alex cranks on it and a few other bits. The rear hub is an SDX RC, so 8 speed, so it can take up to like a 12 speed. One kind of awkward thing about these old Cannondales is they sport a 1 1/4 inch head tube. So that's about 28.6 millimeters, I think. So he cut down this old stem to work as like a quill converter. So you can basically just bolt on a threadless or A-head stem directly onto that. So that's a really useful mod. Rather than finding like an old 1 1/4 inch quill stem to fit the stereo tube, I can pretty much try like any A-head stem. So starting with the disassembly, I didn't know what James had done to the bike, so I thought I'd just tear it down and sort of inspect stuff. But it looks like James had freshly greased this headset. I don't think he used the bike. I think he tested it out a few times and it was a bit too big for him. So I just put this headset back together and then moved on to the next thing. So this is quite a large Cannondale frame. It measures about 61 or just over 61 centimeters in the top tube, center to center, and then the seat tube is about 62 centimeters. Center to the top of the seat tube. I didn't actually measure it with everything off though, so that's kind of like a rough guess because the cranks sort of get in the way with that. So the plan with the bike is to basically keep the paint in as-is condition. I used some Autosol to clean up the raw alloy. I just thought it would look a little bit nicer, have some shiny alloy like scattered in with the paint job. And then because the Autosol sort of scuffs the paint around it, I go over everything with some car polish. This is quite a mild cream polish. This is just to restore the paint around everything. And also because it does have quite a few fine scratches and stuff, it brings a little bit of the shine back to the paint. After this, I go over with wax just to keep everything like nice and smooth. This is the quill stem converter. So instead of just using Evaporust to get rid of the rust, I go over with a file and then sandpaper. It was quite pitted, so the Evaporust wouldn't really do much. It would just leave like that pitted surface. Going over the rest of the build parts, just finding anything that's going to be rusted that I can put into Evaporust just to remove that rust. So this is the derailleur and the levers that I'm going to be using. So some of the bolts were a bit rusty, so take them out. And then I got a bit distracted and thought, I'll see if Autosol will clean these levers up a little bit. I didn't want to go too hard though. Could have gone over everything with sanding and stuff, but then it probably wouldn't have suited the build. So just a quick scuff with some Autosol just to see how it would look. And then throwing all the rusted things into Evaporust overnight. So I use Evaporust to remove rust from steel components, but you can also just use vinegar. Apparently that works quite well. I've never done it, but I like using Evaporust. And then afterwards, to protect it from rusting again, I use some Penetrol, or just paint it if it's like a painted part. So some of the things got some semi-gloss black afterwards. So the wheels that James put on the bike, they felt really smooth. I actually thought that this front one was a sealed bearing unit, but it had this rubber washer, so I thought I'd take it apart just in case. I'm glad I did, because it had quite a bit of gunk and like hair and stuff sort of trapped in there. Durellis too, they also get hair trapped in like all the jockey wheels and everything. I don't know how that always happens. I swear not that many people are running over people, but who knows. The fact that the hub was smooth is a good sign. I just didn't know like when it was serviced or whatever. So just sort of drop that side out with a rag there just in case. And use a magnet to grab out all the bearings and clean them. Nice. Sort of, oh, it's so tight. So the front wheel servicing went smoothly. Just cleaned it up and re-greased it. So the plan with this bike is to do a bit of a commuter build. So I've got these Ritchey Kyote bars. They're quite a nice back swept bar, but because of that little bump forward, it doesn't actually reduce reach at all. But because of the long top tube on the bike, I'm using quite a short stem. This combination works really nicely actually. So you get like the nimble handling of the short stem, but you also get the benefit of the back swept bars. These are quite wide as well. So just using a fun stem. These were on clearance at a local bike store, so I picked it up for a pretty good price. And the blue obviously suits the bike as well. I thought this had a washer. They normally have washers. Might find one. Here's one off just a regular cool stem that I'm not using today. Fits nicely there, so it should fit pretty nicely there. Yeah, that's better. Whoop. Throw some grease, then some on the bolt as well. Give it a little smear around there. Yup. That's exposed steel, I think. Like this, yeah, that's steel. So I think we'll just clear coat this just so it doesn't rust out from underneath us. Just gonna use the semi-gloss. Conveniently, there's a hole in the front of the stem. Whoop. Wipe the excess off. Not that it matters too much because it's probably like a similar finish to the stem anyway. be funny to some because you've got a removable clamp, but actually pretty cool that these bars have like the Ritchey logo in the center there, so I can center the bars up. So I picked up these XT V brakes, not really because I wanted like the XT with the parallelogram, also just because they were some nice V brakes in like pretty good condition. Better than like some random Tektros or something like that. So they have this, they call it like the parallelogram. It basically just allows like the pad to move directly towards the rim rather than like arching over. It just pushes straight towards the rim. So it works quite good, especially if you have like big tires that come out from the rim so that you need to like clear. The only thing is this creates like another bit of confusion or bit of wear. So most of these are okay, they don't have any play, but there's one that has, you can see it there, it like flops around quite a bit. So that's too much. Makes it hard to like dial in the toe, and you just don't want like a floppy brake pad. So all the other ones are nice and tight, and they move like freely but not loosely like this one. Luckily the XT version is serviceable, so you can pull out this and then there's like a pin. They have like these little covers over the tops of the pin there. There's a small Allen key head here. It's basically just a little grub screw. It's very small. Don't want to lose that because the pin will then just pop out. So that's just got like a little machined line in there. That's what the grub screw grabs. From there, this just pops out, and then there's already two shims in there. So one shim on one side, very, very small. It's basically just a little washer. But yeah, there you go. One on each side. So you can see without the washers or shims in there, there's even more slop. So really what you want is like another shim, just to sort of space it up a bit, take out that slop. So I happen to have this, which I think it actually came out of a seat post. I can't really remember, but I kept it around because it's really good for shims and stuff. So it doesn't wear out the alloy. So if anything, this will wear first because it's softer than the alloy that it mates up against. So this is very, very thin. It's almost like a foil. It's thinner than a can, but depending on how much wear is in this brake pivot, you could use a can, I guess. But this is very thin, and I've used this before and it works great. So basically, you just cut like a similar one and then smooth it out with a bit of sandpaper, and then just reassemble it with the extra one. It doesn't create like any extra drag or anything like that. So I just used that small Allen key to sort of line up all the washers there. Don't lose the grub screw, he said. Where's the grub screw? Here it is. Aha. Just snug it up a little bit. No play, still pivots nicely. Cool. Adhesive on. Whoop. Lovely. Now that's all sorted, we can actually throw it on the bike. So I don't normally use V-brakes. I think I have them on one other bike at the moment, the Kona Lava Dome. But because of the front fork on this, it just worked out a little bit easier to use V-brakes than cantilevers. So moving on to the gearing of the bike, servicing the rear wheel first, so just taking off the old 8-speed cassette. I wanted to keep the gearing pretty simple. I was thinking of either doing like a single speed or a 2x8 system. You might as well just cut that off, right? But instead of doing 2x8, I actually had a narrow wide chainring for the cranks that I wanted to use sitting around. And I, believe it or not, I didn't have any middle chainrings to do the 2x8. So I could have used a small chainring and then a large one, and then go like real wide ratio 2x8. But that was really unnecessary, and it's just going to be a commuter like city bike, so I didn't really need that gearing. So I thought a middle chainring and a large chainring would have been good, especially with the 11 to 42 tooth cassette. But I've got that narrow wide chainring, so just a single up front and then 8 gears at the back is more than enough for this build. I think a single speed would have been great too, but I do like having that versatility that gears give you. So just throwing the tyres on now. These are Maxxis Hookworm 2.5 inch wide, which sounds insane. So I have these lightweight tubes, sort of accidental, to counteract the really heavy tyres. The tyres weigh about just under a kilogram each. So I didn't get these light tubes specifically for this bike, but they were cheap, so I picked them up. So this is the cassette I'll be using. It's a 11 to 42 tooth box cassette. This is actually it on a 7-speed hub, because it comes with 6 gears assembled, and then you can just chuck on that extra one. So that's 11 and then 15 tooth. So it is actually bolted together, so I think you could undo the Allen key and then push out the other pins and then like throw in your own gearing. This would make a really cool wide range 7-speed. So there are other sort of cheaper wide range 8-speed cassettes, but I thought my best chances of making a wide range 7 would be with the box. I know someone else has done it before, like make a wide range 7-speed cassette, but I can't remember what item they used. But this box is available locally, so I thought I'd give it a try. And then later on I can do a pretty cool wide range 7-speed bike. So I thought that would be fun. So this is the Ready Relay cage with some satin black paint on it. And then I just go through everything and clean it all up. So this upper pulley wheel actually has some little bearings in it. They sort of fell apart. They have plastic cages, so when I put the magnet on them, all the bearings popped out. So that's fun. So ridiculous. So for this, I think I'm just going to use like a little bit of the clutch grease or the internal gear hub grease. I think this is like a white lithium grease. It's quite low friction, and I think it'll be good for this rather than like a waterproof heavy duty grease, because that's just going to sort of stop them from spinning because they're so tiny. Just a little dab of the grease for the little tiny bearings. This is so stupid. But at least it's not going to rust now. Although I guess the chain lube would do that anyway. So stupid. So cleaning the rear derailleur went okay. I did miss something pretty big though, but you'll see that later on. The hardest part was probably those fiddly little bearings, because they all just came apart and everything. And like the plastic cage was kind of difficult to work with. So testing out the derailleur now, it doesn't quite clear the 42 tooth. I think this would probably clear a 40 tooth. So this will actually need a road link, derailleur extender. This basically just drops down the derailleur a little bit so you can clear a taller cassette. I've tested this on a 46 tooth and it seems to clear. So this 42 tooth should be pretty easy. I haven't tried it yet on a 50 or 51 tooth, but it definitely clears the 46. The only thing is that shifting can get a little bit iffy because of the gap here, so the chain has to come across this part. I probably won't run into that issue because I'm using friction shifting, but that's something to keep in mind, that this does sort of reduce shifting performance. These are the cranks I'll be using on the bike. I only just matched these up. I actually had the drive side sitting around. I think Ashley sent these to me. And then after a while I found someone selling the non-drive side as well. So I matched up the lonely cranks. So these are quite bad condition. Not really actually, I've seen a lot worse. But they've got some pretty deep scratches and stuff. Certainly usable, just not, particularly presentable. So just cleaning them up and then giving them a light polish. I think leaving that excess spray paint on sort of will help them suit the bike as well. I may take this off at some point. So this is the chainring that I'll be using. It has narrow wide teeth on it to sort of help the chain stick to the chainring. This prevents like chain drops and things, and also the teeth are quite tall. So normally going one by you'd use a clutch derailleur, but because it's like a sort of a city or commuter bike, I don't really need it. I'll be using it on some off-road detours and stuff throughout its life. But I've got this Bullet Bros item, which is kind of like an old school clutch. It basically just attaches to the rear derailleur and adds spring tension to it. The shifter I'm going to be using is this old 7-speed friction shifter. This is actually a left-hand side, so there's no indexing at all. It was a little bit stiff, so I thought I'd pull it apart just to service it. So sometimes you can just take off the plastic things and then soak it in a little bit of oil, and that'll help free it up a little bit. So I thought I'd try that first. You can just undo the top cap and then just soak it in some oil. I basically just take the cap off so it doesn't destroy like the lettering and the plastic on it, because oil is pretty bad for plastic. So disassembling now, because that didn't work as well as I'd hoped. So there must be some debris in there, or perhaps some rust or something. So these are pretty easy to pull apart. You really just need that, like a couple of spanners and stuff, that smaller screwdriver. Make sure you don't lose anything though, because some of the parts are pretty small. I think they really only go back together one way. So even if you don't follow like this video or anything like that, you can't really go too wrong. So you can put some things in the wrong order, but as long as you put everything back the way you put it, then you can't really mess up the orientation. I'd say the hardest part is probably putting the actual lever back over the spring, because that adds like a little bit of tension. Sometimes they're really tricky. I think the right hand shifter is a little bit harder than the left hand for whatever reason. So basically it has like these little ears that go onto that slot there, and then you have to sort of line up the spring into the hole and then twist it all down. So line up the ears, make sure the spring's in there, and then twist it to lock it in. So some of the plates in the shifter had a little bit of rust on them, so I just took the grey Scotch-Brite pad and scuffed that off, just making sure that everything was all smooth before putting it back together. I guess just some water got in there and then that started some of the rusting. If everything doesn't have like grease on it to protect it, then yeah, it's just the bare steel will rust at some point. Just making sure everything has a little bit of grease on, just to try and prevent that from happening again. So after cleaning it all out and re-greasing it and then putting it back together, it shifted as normal. It used to have like this little notch sort of midway through the gearing range, but I think that was some of the rust build-up in the shifter. So just reassembling the levers back together now. I did polish up both of the lever assemblies, just mildly with some autosol, and then just cleaned like some parts of it before putting it back together. And then, yeah, reassembling it with the bolts that had been treated with Evaporust. I did put some Penetrol on them afterwards as well, because otherwise they can slowly reform that rust. So the bike was on the ground when I was reassembling the levers and everything, and I just happened to look at it from a different angle, and then I realized that the rear derailleur was bent. Yep. So sometimes you can sort of tweak them back a little bit, but the upper pulley looked like it was tweaked. So I did actually try bend it back a little bit, but no such luck. So instead of damaging anything further from there, I just took the pulley wheels off it and put it on this old Alex item, which they're pretty much the same thing. They seem to have about the same clearance. So it'll basically do the same job. So when I do tweak back old derailleurs, I put them into like a junk frame, something that it doesn't matter if I end up tweaking the derailleur hanger in. Sometimes it's just worth trying rather than like ditching the derailleur. So this this is like some polymorph that I use to make a cable guide with. So the Cannondales have quite a unique bottom bracket cable guide. They're quite a flat style, so none of the ones that I had would fit. So I thought I'd just try some polymorph. It looks like that will work. I've been trying it. I've been using the bike for a few days, and it seems to work okay, so I think I'll redo it a bit more streamlined. So I could just use the shifter on the left hand side like it was intended, but you can actually run them upside down on the incorrect side. I've never actually used them like this. I'm guessing there's a weird point where it's like harder to reach, but I don't know yet. We'll see. Maybe it's not gonna go on this side. I don't know. Because the brake lever sort of fouls on it. I'll take it out of the stand and then have a mess around with it. Add just a little bit of toe in, just gently twisting it there. And tighten back up, make sure it's still got that toe in the right spot. And it'll also help you put the spring on its perch, so it actually do something. We can bend this up to meet to the basket. Something sort of like that, but with not this. Basically just keep test fitting until it's good, and then put like another piece on top and bolt it through. Just gotta make sure you have enough tire clearance, obviously. So this is the bike all completed. I'm really happy with how it came out. The seat was one of the things that I didn't quite know if they'd be comfy for me. The handlebar grips, they were just sitting around in my parts bin, so they're not really matching any of the bike. And even the bar ends, I might change those as well. But the grips are really comfy, so I'm glad I put them on. The coil steam converter that James made has been working really well. I haven't done any hardcore off-roading or anything like that, but I've done like little curb chomps and little things like that. So the steam hasn't slipped at all, so that's been great. It's basically just a regular coil steam converter, but sort of DIY. But James did a really good job, so the surface is nice and flush on that. The gearing, I haven't had any issues with that either, but like I said, as it's friction shifting, the shifting is like buttery smooth anyway. But it hasn't dropped a chain or anything. The brakes work good now too, that I've put that brake booster on. The brake cable and the lever feel just felt a little bit too squishy for me. So it's still not perfect because of that seat stay flex, but it's more than great enough to stop the rear wheel and to lock up the rear wheel. So yeah, I'm going to include like a little bit of riding footage now, and then I'll talk about the bike and upcoming builds later on in the video.
How did they not see you? They're dumb. Fucking idiots. Now it's good to go, you monkeys. Stuck in the back lane. Oh, BMWs, man. The good thing is, I can go up the footpath there. I'm afraid of the bike. I use the crossing a little bit. Thank you. Thanks. And scoot on up. See if the front can. Nope. Not with the load. Oh yeah. Hey little kitty kitty. Meow. That was a bit fucking loud. Yeah. No doggies, no doggies. This is probably the sketchiest bit of footpath that I come down because of all the debris and shit that covers the path. Not really that sketchy on these guys, but something a bit skinny, it sort of darts over. It's okay. Definitely better on these guys. Nice and wide. Really heavy, but nice and wide. Rolling. Rolling. Thank you. Hello. Hiya. Hiya. Kind of like tarmac and a little bumpy and sort of half-assed. Hiya. I don't know if they're going to leave that. I guess you could drop down. I don't know, have your light on. Hiya. Fucking very bright. Yeah. If you're not lighting it up, I don't know if people do that. Hello. Yes. So the next build is going to be a fixed gear. I don't know how I feel about hills and fixed gear again. Moving gears is so nice. Yeah. Hello. Going downhill and look, even now. We'll pedal as fast as I can and see what happens. And stopping it. Very loud. There's no like in between. And do like a little we missed it. No, oh, that guy didn't. How did that guy just fail to die?
So my thoughts of the bike, pretty quickly. I really like the whole setup. The hookworms with the ESI chunky grip, and then obviously like the friction shifting wide range 8-speed. That works really well. I don't know if it would be the same with indexing. Playing through the leaves was fun. I really like the handling of the Hookworm tyres because you can lean it over and there's no edge or anything like that it transitions to in the sidewall. I love the sound of them as well, especially when skidding on some concrete and stuff. It's quite high pitched and it's a really loud squeal. It's nice. Happy with the bike overall. It's actually quite comfy. It has a bit of flex to it as well. I don't know if that's something just with the larger Cannondales, but yeah, really happy with the bike. The next build is going to be a 26-inch fixed gear mountain bike, and then I've got a couple of 700C bikes, like a Nexus one and a fixed gear, and then a bunch of other bikes. So thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.